Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be talking quite a bit about Eula, all about what what kind of teammates you might want to prepare for beforehand, what kind of artifacts you want, but also just her generally as a character a little bit. So first let's briefly go over what Eula does, just very quickly. So essentially what Eula does, she's a cryo greatsword character, where her E generates, gives her stacks, and if you, by pressing, and then if you hold them, you essentially get a little sword that drops down and lowers physical res and cryo res. And your R2 gives you it so that you get a damage bonus if you hit 2 stacks of it. And her ultimate is like literally 60% of her damage, 70% of her damage, some insane amount of her kit. Essentially, whenever you hit it, you spawn a sword. It does a big slash, and then you spawn a little like magical floating sword that you stack up. And as you do damage, and then it detonates and does damage based on how much damage was dealt. That is essentially like her entire kit, and that's what you essentially play around. Your Eula, despite being a physical damage hyper carry style unit, is essentially a burst button that you have to charge up while she's on field. So it's kind of a little bit her as a character. She's a very fun character, very complex character, very rewarding character. But there are some semi-common misconceptions, or not necessarily misconceptions, but over pushed things about her and some things you need to understand. The first thing that you need to understand is that Eula is very, very good at C6. She's a perfectly fine unit at C0 and with a normal weapon. But most people who are going to give you honest, or who are going to give you opinions of Eula, her constellations change how she plays. Or not how she plays, it changes how easy it is to stack her ult up. Gives her a lot more damage, gives her a lot more physical damage, makes her energy, fuel herself energy a lot easier, a whole bunch of different things. And because she is a huge part of her team's damage, being a hyper carry, her weapon also makes a huge difference. This means that you need to be very careful where you get your resources from and where you get your information from, because for example, a C2 and above Eula does not use the same team that a C0 Eula uses. There's different things you can get away with. Also, you need to understand how much damage the person is doing relative to the content. If you one-shot with Eula, you run a very different team than if you're looking for consistent DPS. And also, how well you cycle your supports changes who you should run and who you should play. And that's very important to know. But first, let's just go a little bit more about Eula and what you should build. If you're looking to prep for her, talent books are the shields. I got mine to level her up to 888. I just haven't done it yet. So shield books, she requires the cryo or cube material, this thing here, for her Ascension. And for artifacts, you can go either a combination of Pale Flame and Bloodstain, Bloodstain and Gladiator, Bloodstain and Shimenawa. Essentially any combination of 4-piece Pale Flame or 2-piece Pale Flame, 2-piece Bloodstain, 2-piece, and any of those combined with Gladiator or Shimenawa as well as a 2-piece. Generally, whatever you have the best substats for, but just know that Pale Flame is her best, although her most consistent arguably is to Bloodstain to Pale Flame. Obviously, Physical Goblet, and then you want to build her like a standard character. Attack, despite the fact that she needs a lot of energy, she is the main source of damage on her team, so attack percent. Standard, you want to build crit on her. And for her weapons, there are a couple kind of semi-misconceptions about weapons for her. If you have it, obviously, a Wolf's Gravestone, Song of Broken Pines, or a Serpent Spine, especially at high refines, those are the 3 best claymores of the game, especially if you can maintain the Serpent Spine stacks. A lot of times it'll end up beating out a lot of the 5 stars without multiple refines. But for Horror Claymore, some of your best options are Prototype Archaic, perfectly fine. The normal attack damage bonus here is actually white damage, is physical damage, so it is modified by her physical damage bonus. Other options include the Snow Tomb Star Silver, which does look a lot, it matches her. It gives her this physical damage bonus, but Despite popular belief, these two are very close in damage. This one being a bit more consistent on the damage front, this one having higher potential. So if you can what that means is if you can one-shot the content, this sword is going to be better. If you have to actually DPS a lot, this sword will often be better. Blackcliff, also a very solid option, especially if you can get stacks. This end up actually beating out these two. As long as you can get a couple stacks rolling on you, and especially having that crit is very good. However, I'm going to tell you the secret free-to-play sauce, okay? The sauce. People aren't going to tell you this. Alright? Her best weapon is the fish. You heard me right. If you're free-to-play, her best weapon is the fish. Being a character that is ridiculously reliant on her burst damage, getting 24% extra burst damage is actually insane. Now, am I going to tell you to use the fish? No, it looks stupid. But if you care about it, it can be like a significant DPS increase over these two, especially because it's R5 and it was cheap for us to 90. So if you have it and you don't really care about the look or you think it's funny, go for it, be my guest. If not, either of these three weapons will work. Personally, Archaic or Blackcliff is more where I lean because you're going to level these up to use on other characters probably anyway. So if you have them, use them. Obviously, Serpent Spine. If you're willing to buy the Battle Pass, Serpent Spine is going to be awesome for you. Get a Serpent Spine. Now let's briefly talk about her teammates and some common misconceptions. So for most players, most normal Eula players who do not have C6, who are not one-shotting content, who don't have C2 to funnel her more energy, you're going to need batteries plus supercharged. So, or superconduct, my apology. So my recommendation, Diona, probably one of her best batteries, also can be run with a sacrificial bow to give double procs on her E. Her E generates 5 particles each, so that's 10 cryo particles. Even if Diona ends up being the one to pick them up, you're gonna battery your Eula quite well. Rosaria and Kaya also being very solid options for this. If you're new to Eula, or if you're just not super good at rotating, I fully recommend running 2 cryo batteries with the with a superconduct character. If you want my personal recommendation, I think if you have constellations to get the physical shred on Rosaria, I actually think Rosaria probably is your go-to, but I think without this, or especially without her C2, it kind of goes back and forth between Kaya. Kaya gives a little bit more energy and is a little bit more consistent with his energy. It kind of does a little bit more damage over time, has more personal cryo application, which helps with maintaining cryo resonance for the 15% crit buff, or you can just run Rosaria with her crit buff. For the single superconduct unit, you have 2 main options. Fischl is great if you have, she's relatively easy to get. You can run her on something like a Stringless for extra damage. You can run her on Thundering Fury, Shimenawa, something like that. And essentially you just use Oz because Oz will shoot a lot, and you can prop superconduct off it. Great, wonderful, use it. Other options, Raiden, if you have her, is essentially just a 5-star Fischl in this comp. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, you're going to see a lot of people overhype the Raiden version of this comp to absolute hell. It is nice, but it is simply a more consistent version of the Fischl one that has a lower potential damage ceiling due to the extended rotation of having to use Raiden. If you're playing proper, the difference between Fischl and Raiden is almost negligible. However, she is more convenient, and if you have her and you want to use her, be my guest. And especially if you have some constellations on her to make her ult better, be my guest. But people are going to oversell it and make it sound like she's a complete replacement for Fischl and it's no contest. No, it's not like that. Fischl is fine. Use Fischl, you'll be perfectly fine. And Fischl is especially better if you want to run the kind of the more max potential version of this comp, but we'll get to that later. Other options, there is another option. All right, this is the hidden tech passed down to me by the C6 Eula gods. All right, this can work for you too, but this is I swear this isn't a meme. Noblesse Thrilling Tales of the Dragon Slayer Lisa. Now hear me out here for a second. Essentially, you're just using Lisa as the biggest buff stick in the world to buff your Eula's ultimate. The reason this works to a degree, obviously besides the fact she's a catalyst, she can hold Thrilling Tales, she can hold Noblesse, just build her as much energy recharge as you can, is because 15% defense shred. Now this isn't the biggest deal in the world. It's not a deal breaker, but this is something nice to have, and it's something nice to consider. Especially if you can one-shot with Eula, a Thrilling Tales of the Dragon Slayer Noblesse Lisa bot actually is a serious option. Another serious option is Xinyan if you have her C4. If you have her C4 for the extra 15% Fizz Res, this means that that along with her A4 talent will give you up to 30% physical shred. Or sorry, we'll give you 15% increased physical damage and then lower 15% Fizz Res. Pretty good. However, she can kind of mess around a little bit with the superconducts, occasionally overload. You got to be careful. It's not a meme. You can use it if you want to. All right. Now, let's talk about kind of the version of this comp that I prefer to play. That is the much more sweatlordy version, is the Fischl Beidou combo. So the reason this is good, obviously, is not just because Fischl does a lot of off-field damage, but it's also because especially if you're if you're not a C6 Eula, it can be quite hard to stack her ultimate up. But if you're getting the extra 15% attack speed and attack damage from Beidou's A4 talent, this can actually help cover a lot of that weakness pretty good. But, of course, this requires you to essentially hit a perfect parry before going into a Eula ult. So it's not necessarily always doable, but if you get used to it, it is doable, and it does help smooth out your Eula ults a lot. However, you have to get very used to playing this comp and funneling your Beidou correctly while funneling Eula and prepping both ults. You have two 80 cost bursts to manage here. Whereas if you just, let's say, chuck Raiden in here and chuck, like, Zhongli in here, which is the team I would, if you have both of them, I think Raiden, Zhongli is kind of like the super comfy version of this team, is kind of where I would lean. If you have them and you don't want to like be really on the ball when you're playing your Eula. Like I assume that's the combo you're gonna see most content runners that aren't content creators who aren't like really min-maxy kind of players running, because that's a much more consistent and safe combo, whereas this is much more of a like maximum potential kind of combo. However, this is very important with Eula, because she is a character that semi-revolves around, like, because she can one-shot stuff, there are situations where dropping more damage over time for stuff like the Lisa I mentioned and stuff like Xinyan can be better if it lets you one-shot content. So, the main takeaway I wanted to take away from this in the team thing is that even though you saw her teams kind of generally follow a single concept, which is you want a superconductor generally, and you want some supports. Ideally, you want a shield as well, because Eula is quite frail and she doesn't want to be interrupted from any of her animations, so Diana was perfect there. But as the broader community as a whole is definitely going to either give you the opinion that this unit is really broken, like, this is definitely one of those units that is very polarizing. A lot of people are like, she's okay, and a lot of people are like, no, 7 million damage screenshot, baby, this is the best character in the game, or this is a top tier character. Realistically, she's somewhere in between. I wouldn't say she's not bad, but she definitely is the right below. You know, if you're looking at Ganyu, Hu Tao, Zhao, Ayaka as the top DPS units, she's kind of right below that, kind of hanging out with Diluc, which to some people sounds bad, but it's not an insult. Diluc is still a good played. Diluc team probably still does more damage than most people do with their better built teams, if you actually rotate it properly. Like, even people who are probably playing their Ganyu teams or whatever now are probably doing less damage than you can theoretically do with the Diluc team if you play it well. So that's not an insult, but it is very important to notice that she is very alt reliant. Like, I know I've said this multiple times, but seriously, if you miss that ult, if that ult doesn't crit, you're resetting the Abyss Chamber. You're not timing. Like, it is very important to land her ults and to land her crits, and this is kind of what makes her a divisive character, because she is really strong whenever it pulls off well, and really meh whenever it doesn't. So this isn't to discourage you from pulling from her. She's a great unit. She's a lot of fun. But I wanted to kind of arm you with the knowledge going into this of what kind of characters you can build around her, what kind of artifacts you should get, what kind of, weapons, all that kind of stuff. And if you're rolling for Eula, I hope you have good luck. And if you have any, things you'd like to talk about, be free to leave them in the comments below and I'll answer it. But yeah, Thanks for watching.